Well, hello YouTube. My name is Gaeton and I'm a space engineer.
My name is Connor and I am the pony.
My name's Jesse and I'm the cowboy.
Hi, I'm a paladin and my name's Chip.
Today we're going to be talking about a very awesome video game, a little outdated, but we're going to be giving a group review of it. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to Dead Space.
Ooh, Dead Space.
Woo! I should take note that me and Gaeton are very, very big fans of the series, but we are not going to be biased. We're going to be very objective. So this is going to be as fair of a review that we can possibly give.
All right, we're just going to hop right into an overview of the series. The timeline, it came out on October 14th, 2008 for the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. And 1 week later made a debut for the Windows on October 20th, 2008. It was created by Visceral Games, which is formerly Redwood, and it's an EA game, and it's a new sci-fi horror survival genre. It's not your typical zombie game per se, like most of the games that have been coming out previously. You know, Left 4 Dead, ooh, scary. It's actually a new revolutionary way to think of a survival horror game, encompassing a lot of new features in a much more intuitive way to survive your hordes of zombies that are coming at your face. So we're going to get right into the story. I'll be taking you guys through the story. Let's talk about a little bit of some of the pros in the game. There was a great depth of immersion in this game's story. There's just so many subtle aspects and so many details that can keep a character just progressing through this game. Anything from subtle as an audio log or a text log, especially a text log, because I think you actually need to spend a minute or two of your time taking a closer look at what these people that used to be on the Ishimura, the location that the game takes place in, had to say in their final moments. There's always a looming sense of darkness and foreboding, even if you're in what seems like a relatively safe place. There's a very unique concept for the way that the enemies, known as the necromorphs, came to be, and the concept of the marker, which is a symbol of the Unitologist Church, a radical, idealistic group that is present throughout the Dead Space series. That marker almost controls the necromorphs in two ways. It's a catalyst for the biotic virus of the necromorph gene to build, but it also has a dead space field, hence where the game gets its title. In the dead space field, necromorphs cannot pass past that certain point because they would just revert to a biological sludge. Connor, why don't you give some of your own thoughts as to some of the better parts of the story?
Well, one of my favorite things, Gaeton, is that Isaac Clarke is not a hero. He comes into this very extraordinary situation incredibly unprepared. At the start of the game, he has his normal engineering suit on, which is barely anything more than a t-shirt with a helmet, and all of a sudden he's expected to fight off these hordes and hordes and hordes of necromorphs. That feeling of this is just a regular Joe really drives a connection between the player and the character home.
But as much as we can say positive things about this game throughout the day, there are some obvious cons with the story that really need to be addressed. One of which really is it's almost like a lack of a personal connection to most of the players in the game, and in some cases, even to Isaac Clarke. Most of the characters kind of had their own sort of agenda, and you basically wound up turning into the errand boy. Isaac was kind of just going through the story and doing these things for them, not because he cared about them, but the player just knew that that was the next logical step in the story. And in regards to the final boss, I just spent my entire game fighting a bunch of, zombies that are popping around the corner and deformed humans, and then, giant magical space worm just comes out of the ground and starts tearing apart all the people. Like, what? Visceral, what? What are you... What was this supposed to be? I mean, somebody might argue it's just a conglomeration of a bunch of dead bodies and dead pieces and stuff like that, but it's really just a magic space worm, and you fight it and then you escape. Well, you sort of escape. Yeah, the ending's a little jump at you. But the point being, there were so many more logical ways that the game could have ended you. A game doesn't need to have a grandiose boss fight at the end for the ending to make a point. Javier, why don't you put
Yeah.
some input on the end of the game?
Of course. Let's look at the rest of the game, for example. Of course, it's a survival horror. It's all about, juking enemies, uh, surviving, cutting off limbs, etc. Strategic dismemberment, so to speak. And then the game just, throws almost a generic, king enemy, like the big dude at the end of the game, the big boss, the final boss. It's like, it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the game, in my opinion. It's the black sheep of the group.
So,
Agreed.
after a bunch of close analysis, we've come up with a sort of rating for how we feel the story did, and we give the story of Dead Space 1 a 4.5 pengs out of 5 rating.
Yes, story is important, but graphics in today's generation of games is almost as important. As unfortunate as it may sound, as opposed to gameplay, graphics definitely tend to make a game these days. And at the time, that is 2008, this game is beautiful. It's got superb graphics on every aspect, and so let's just dive right into it. The graphics were good, and especially for what they were trying to do. And what they were trying to do is create a survival horror game that will last the ages. And they definitely succeeded. What they have is a dark environment, use of gritty graphics, and they're used to the best ability, because the gore is definitely there. The colors, the colors of the flesh, of the creep, the dark reds and greens, really give you a sense of disgust, because obviously that's what they wanted. The necromorphs are just, conglomerate pieces of flesh put together. And as well, as most games have, especially most shooter games, is a HUD, where the corners of your screens are your ammo count and your health and all that. But this game doesn't have those HUD-esque elements. So the health bar usually is in the corner of the screen or in the middle of the screen or the top of the screen, but in this game, no. The health bar is on the character himself. Isaac has a rig, which is what the game calls the health bar on the back, built right into the character. As well, the ammo doesn't take up a corner of the screen, but is instead built into your weapons. So when you aim, it's right there. The environment is nice, dark, and dank. Gives you a sense of, fright. And, as much as the graphics were good, there also were some small problems with the graphics. For example, the models they use for the necromorphs are unique compared to most games. However, in Dead Space 1, the standard issue necromorph is used quite a lot, and there is some varying differences between some of the necromorphs, but the base model, the big dude with the claws, he's used quite a bit. As well, some of the gibs, those chunks of meat on the ground, were just very simple. And I'll give it this, the animations on death were great. Some of them horrifically awesome, sometimes epic even, but those gibs were sometimes quite simple. Connor, what's your input on the graphics of this game?
Yeah, the graphics were pretty good, especially, you have these games coming out and everyone, unfortunately, are very big sticklers on graphics. They go back and play something on the Super Nintendo and they think it's like the worst thing they've ever seen. But, there were times when you walk around and you say to yourself, I think I've seen this before, like 5 rooms ago.
Thanks for the input there. But despite these small, bad parts about this game, graphics-wise, the graphics are still great. And for that, I give the graphics of this game 4 pangs out of 5.
Alright, thank you, Chip and Connor, on the input on graphics. My name is Jesse, and I will be talking about the controls. Now, the controls were pretty good in this game. Some of the pros were that the weapon, it was based on dismemberment. In any basic standard first-person shooting games or whatever, or action games, you shoot them in the head and they die. But in this game, if you shoot them in the head, they'll still come after you. You have to focus on taking out the legs and the arms. And if you just shoot off the legs, the enemies still have a chance to crawl after you. So it's really vital, and it gives you kind of a very terrifying survival situation that these things can't die easily. The controls are very good, but they're also they also had a lot of flaws in them. The controller mapping wasn't the best it could be. The standard reload button for pretty much every first-person shooter game during that time was the X button. So let's say it's your first time playing Dead Space, and you're walking around, and you're in your first action sequence, and you're like, oh yeah, this is gonna be so awesome, and you kill and stuff, and then you press X to reload, and you accidentally use up one of your health packs, and you only had a little bit of damage taken. You will probably rage. Also, Stomp Speed was very sluggish. In stopping in Dead Space 2, it was pretty much instantaneous. You hit the button, it stomps no matter what. In Dead Space 1, you hit the button, stomp, it'd wait 2 seconds, and then you do it again. So let's say you had multiple enemies on the floor crawling around you. You could only hit one at a time, so you could be getting hit from behind while still reloading your stomp from the first one. I'd also like to talk about the zero gravity. The zero gravity rooms are very tedious, long, and very linear. What you do is you walk into the zero gravity room, you'd aim down your sight, and you press Y, and you'd float through the air. Like, you're on a hammock, and you just, whatever, maybe you get a margarita, you just cruise along, and then finally you'll eventually land on your targeted area. There's this one part where you're trying to, in the zero gravity room, dodge asteroids. You could be flying through the air, and then all of a sudden, oh, hey, Mr. Asteroid, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just gonna kill you. Boom. Basically, an overview of this controls is, yeah, there are some good things that really help the survival aspect, but overall, there are more cons than pros. So I give this rating a 3.5 pangs out of 5.
Alright, now what I want to talk about is what the game went out to do and if it accomplished that goal. Obviously, what the game wanted to do was scare an audience, the question is, did it accomplish that? Did it do what it set out to do? And for the most part, the answer is yes, because obviously this is a very, very unique way to portray survival horror. For every clip of ammo that you get, there's about 15 necromorphs. You have to be smart. The other part that I really like about the game is that there's not many cheap jump scares. There's one or two where there's a loud noise or there's this big music hit and you're like, whoa, what was that? That doesn't happen that much. So without that, the game has to solely rely on other ways to scare the audience. Now, yes, this did kind of revolutionize the way people portray survival horror, but there's some small little tedious things that make me say, no, it failed on some degree. First thing is that this is a shooting game, and because of that, this game's not exactly for everyone, and also on that note, the game does take a little bit of patience. You cannot be that kid on Xbox Live claiming hacks every time you're in a bad scenario.
Why did you do that? I didn't see a video game.
And for all those reasons, we are giving this specific part of the game, did it accomplish its goal? So for that reason, we are giving this piece a 4.75 pangs out of 5.
Alright, you guys, thanks for sticking around through the whole video. We talked about each of the individual aspects, but I'm sure you guys are really curious as to how we feel the game did as a whole. And so, drum roll please. We are giving the game a 4.5 Ishimuras out of 5. We were overall impressed with the game as a whole in all of its aspects, and there are obvious flaws because I've yet to see a perfect game.